So don't think that volta or turn comes only in Petrarchan sonnet because there is an octave, then a volta, then a sestet. No, it's not like that. Volta is a turn, a change in tone. This happens in Shakespearean sonnets. This you find in Spenserian sonnets, because that is what a sonnet is. A sonnet is a poet talking to himself. Hello and welcome back to Nibblepop. Today in this video we are going to look at a specific poetic genre called the sonnet. You have many sonnets in your syllabus, and it is always useful if we have a working knowledge of what sonnet means, what are its different types, how to identify whether a poem is a sonnet or not, and what are the primary features which you can find especially in English sonnets. Don't skip any part of this video, because I'm not just going to give you the characteristics of sonnets, but I'm going to illustrate them to you with many examples. Subscribe to our channel if you want to stay connected, and share the content with your friends. This is Monami Mukherjee. Welcome once again. The word sonnet comes from an Italian word sonetto, which means a little song. So this is going to be a small poem which is comparable to a song so far as the meaning of the word sonnet is concerned. Technically, a sonnet usually refers to a 14-line poem with a definite rhyme scheme. It originated in Italy in the hands of Dante and Petrarch, who popularized the form, and it became a very prominent feature of English poetry through the hands of people like Wyatt and Surrey. Now, I have discussed at length about the starting point of sonnets in England in my video on Elizabethan poetry. Many of you have already watched that video. If you haven't watched that video, the I button would help you take there, and you can also find the link in the description box. So there I have discussed at length about the origin of sonnets, how they came into England, and who were the prominent sonneteers of the Elizabethan era. Today's discussion is not going to be on the historical aspect of sonnets in England. We are going to look at the technical aspect of sonnets. A sonnet is, as I have told you, basically a 14-line poem, usually written in iambic pentameter, and it follows a certain rhyme scheme. Now we are going to look at specific types of sonnets. What are the different kinds of sonnets? What are the variations? Broadly speaking, we can identify three major variations of the sonnet genre in England or English poetry. One is the Italian version, the Petrarchan Sonnets. The second one is the English version or the Shakespearean Sonnets. And the third one is, you can say it's very similar to the Shakespearean version in some ways and Petrarchan version in some ways. This is the Scottish version. This is called Spenserian Sonnet. Okay, so if you are going to apply for any competitive exams, especially NET or SET or any school service commission exams, these are the questions that you should prepare. You know, what are the different kinds of features we have in these different kinds of sonnets. So pay very close attention. The fourth variation is there, of course, the modern sonnet, you can say. Sometimes it goes beyond the definition. We will come to those things, but let's just first look at the three prominent variations, the Petrarchan, the Shakespearean, and then finally the Spenserian variation of sonnet. Now, Italian sonnet, it is called Petrarchan sonnet, but it was not invented by anyone called Petrarch. It was invented by a person called Giacomo da Lentini in 13th century in Italy. Okay, but this was made popular by a poet whose name was Francesco Petrarch. So, because he made it popular, therefore this type or this category of sonnet is called Petrarchan sonnets. Usually the theme of Petrarchan sonnets are unrequited love, praise of the beloved, and adhering to a kind of a courtly love tradition. Now, what is courtly love tradition? I have discussed this in the video which I have mentioned, but I'll just give you one hint here. Courtly love tradition has certain ideas, you can say, that the woman who is the beloved is usually placed on a pedestal. No, she is idealized, and she should not be somebody whom you can easily obtain. So that beloved figure should be unavailable, and that love should be unrequited, something which you don't get. And this dissatisfaction is because this situation is so ideal where you will get the person that is not going to happen in real life. And this is the undercurrent or the main theme of Petrarchan sonnets. And as the people who brought in the convention of Petrarchan sonnet in England, they brought in the convention of courtly love as well. These are 14-line poems, but you can thematically divide the poem into two parts. The first 8 lines of the poems, which are Petrarchan sonnets, they give you a certain kind of angle, and the next 6 lines give you another angle. I'll explain to you how. For example, the first 8 lines usually give you a set of propositions, or maybe they explain a situation, or they raise a question. The next 6 lines are either an answer to that question, a kind of a resolution to that proposition, or a kind of a reaction to that situation. Okay, so it's like a twofold structure of 8 lines followed by 6 lines. Now the first 8 lines are called octave, and the last 6 lines are called sestate. Sometimes people also refer to the first 8 lines as octet, which is fine, but we will go with the word octave. In the 16th century, this whole convention was introduced in England by this poet and politician Sir Thomas Wyatt. Now, as I was talking to you about octave and sestate, 8 lines and 6 lines, just after the 8 lines end, there is a kind of a turn. Either it can be an actual word such as but, therefore, okay, which will make you understand that this is the point from where a different kind of answering or different kind of approach is given from the line 9 onwards. Sometimes prominent words might not be present. Sometimes it can happen that you can understand the shift in the tone or shift in approach from the content itself. In any way, you can identify a kind of a turn from the 9th line onwards, okay, where the proposition changes to something like resolution or something like reaction. This turn is technically called a volta, V-O-L-T-A. It's called a volta, and it usually comes in the beginning of the sestate, which can be either the beginning of the 9th line or at the end of the octave, where it's like kind of preparing the readers for the turn. Okay, that is volta. Rhyme scheme is very important in sonnets. In Petrarchan sonnets, you usually have a very methodical rhyme scheme in the first 8 lines. It's like A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A. Okay, in the first 8 lines. In the sestate, usually there is a lot of variation. It can be CD, CD, CD. Now, I hope you know what a rhyme scheme is and how to understand the rhyme scheme of a poem. If not, when we will have our examples, I can make you understand that. Okay, let's take an example of a Petrarchan sonnet. I'm taking an example from Wordsworth, London, 1802, where he first talks about the situation in which they are in at that moment, and how he wants Milton to kind of inspire them into a revival. So first let me explain to you how to identify the rhyme scheme of a poem. Look at the last word of the first line. It's our. Okay, so we will name this line as A. After this line, we have the word fen. Now, does fen rhyme with our? No. So, it is not rhyming with A, so we call it B. Then we come to the next line, pen. Now, does pen rhyme with fen? Yes. So, we put the same letter which we have put with fen, that is B. So, we are putting the letter B beside the third line. Then fourth line, bower. Bower sounds very similar or rhymes with the word our. Our was A. So, bower is also A. So, this is how you form this pattern of rhymes. Like we have the first 4 lines as A, B, B, A. Now, the same thing happens in the next 4 lines. Come to the 9th line now. Apart. Now, when you look at the words before this, like the words which end the lines in the octave, we do not have any word which rhymes with apart. So, we cannot put A or B here. So, we have to put C here. Okay, so we have put C here. Then we have the word C. It doesn't match with apart. So, we put D here. Free rhymes with C. So, we have D. Way. Now, way is nowhere, right? It doesn't sound connected in rhyme with any word preceding it. So, we have to put a new letter, that is E. And then heart, which matches with apart. So, we put C here, apart was C. And then we have the word lay. Lay matches with way in rhyme. So, we have put the letter E. So, what does the rhyme scheme of the last 6 lines look like? C, D, D, E, C, E. Okay. So, the whole poem has this rhyme scheme of A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, D, E, C, E. Alright. So, the first 8 lines, they are matching with our idea of a Petrarchan sonnet. But as I told you, that people experimented a lot when it came to the sestate part. Now, why did English people experiment so much? Before that, let me just give you a visual example of Petrarchan sonnet. Now, I don't know Italian, I'm sorry, but we can see and understand the rhyme pattern here because we can at least read the words which end the lines. So, Rimena is A, Famiglia is B, it doesn't match with Rimena. Philomena matches with Rimena. So, it is A again. And then you have Vermiglia, which is B. So, here it is not ABBA, it is ABAB. So, that can happen, like you just have A and B recurring either in the pattern of ABBA or ABAB, that is fine. Again, as you can see, Razarena and Payena, they match, but Figlia and Siglia. So the first 8 lines come as AB, 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 AB. And then you have CD, CD, CD. So what I want to tell you is, it doesn't matter how the rhymes are arranged in octave and sestate. What you can identify first from Wordsworth's poem, now from Petrarch's poem, you can understand that there is a distinct break after 8 lines. The rhyme changes after 8 lines. Now, why did the English people experiment so much with Petrarch's rhyme scheme? First, because in Italian, it is easier to rhyme because most of their words, they end in A, so it's easier for you to rhyme there. In English, it is very difficult to find rhyming pair of words so much to suit your purpose. Then if you are focusing so much on rhyme, then your content goes out of the window. So if you are focusing on your content, you have to compromise on the rhyme or you have to modify it. And that is why English poets, they modified the rhyme scheme of Petrarchan sonnets, especially the sestate part. So let's just look at some more examples to get the point clear. Let's take an example from Milton. Milton wrote this sonnet on his blindness, and here in the first 8 lines, as I have already analyzed for you, you can see the rhyme scheme is A, B, B, A, A, B, B, A, and the sestate is C, D, E, C, D, E. So this follows the pattern of Petrarchan sonnets. But many of you have heard the expression Miltonic sonnet. But I did not say that Miltonic sonnet is a kind of sonnet. Why? Because structurally Milton's sonnets match Petrarch's sonnets. Structurally. Thematically, his sonnets are different. They were more like philosophical, you can say. They dealt with political issues at times. Sometimes he dealt with moral issues. And he has this tendency of using enjambment a lot. Enjambment is where in poetry you have the last word of a line as not the end of a sentence. For example, if you take this poem, look at the 4th line. The end of the 4th line is bent, but the sentence or the sense doesn't end there. My soul more bent to serve there with my maker. So he is forcing you to read the next part without stopping. So that is called an enjambment. This is something which is unique in Milton. You find this in Paradise Lost, a lot of enjambment in most lines. So you don't actually know whether to stop at the end of a line or in the middle of a line where he wants you to stop because he has put a full stop there. So Miltonic sonnets are thematically different but structurally similar to Petrarchan sonnets. So now you have understood what rhyming scheme is. Now let's look at the content so that you understand how the turn is happening, how the volta is happening. Okay, so these are examples. So I'll just give you a very brief account of these poems. In On His Blindness, Milton first talks about his situation. He has become blind and he is suffering and he is confused as to how he is supposed to serve God when he is so powerless. So in the first 8 lines, we have an account of his suffering and his troubles and his inquiry into the purpose of things. And then from the 9th line, you have this expression, that murmur soon replies. So see, he is giving you a turn here, that he is asking a set of questions and then from his soul a reply comes, and that reply forms the sestate. And there you have this thematic shift, and the sestate is giving you, after this turn, a certain set of resolutions. And finally he realizes that it is also important to be faithful to God and just wait. That is also serving. Okay, you don't always have to work hard and show a lot of action. You can serve God simply by being loyal to God. The next poem we are going to look at is Farewell Love and All Thy Laws Forever. Again, a very famous poem. Here I want you to first look at the rhyme scheme which I have prepared for you. It's A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, D, C, E, E. So Petrarchan. Okay. Another way to identify whether it's a Petrarchan or not, we have to look at the 9th line. First, the poet is talking about his disgust with love. He doesn't want to fall in love with people anymore. And he says that I'm not interested in loving anyone anymore. So farewell love. And in the 9th line he says, therefore farewell. So first he gives the reasons why he wants love to go away from his life. And then in the last 6 lines he gives a kind of farewell to love itself. So there is a shift. And this word therefore acts as the turn, the volta. Okay, so you have a Petrarchan sonnet here where you can clearly identify the octave and the sestate. But notice one thing, there is no stanza division. A sonnet always looks like a box, a tight box, and it's often felt that it is very difficult to write a sonnet because you have to put in so much effort to remain within the box that it becomes very difficult to fly out of it. But poetry is about flying out of it. right? So how to achieve that end, how to remain within the cage of this convention, and yet how to open the cage and do something remarkable. Well, we find that in sonnets that we have from William Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? My most favorite sonnet. Look at the structure. You can clearly see that he's already breaking free from the convention, because you have in front of you, instead of 8-6 division, you have 4-4-4-2, that kind of division. But look at the first word of the 9th line. It is but. So there is a tendency to go on with the Petrarchan convention of proposition and resolution, because that is what the sonnet is about. It's giving you a problem and then it's offering a resolution. He is also doing the same thing. First he gives a kind of a detailed account of how summer looks like, how nature is, and then he goes on to use this word but to say why his beloved is better than nature even. All right. What is striking is the pair of lines which end the poem. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this and this gives life to thee. It clearly looks like a pair of lines which are supposed to work together. They rhyme and they even begin similar way. This is called a rhyming couplet. Couplet means it's a couple of lines which go together, rhyming because C rhymes with D. Therefore, it's called a rhyming couplet. And it's also a concluding couplet because this is where the poem ends. So, if you look at the rhyme scheme of this poem, day is A, temperate is B, May is again A, date is B. So, you have A, B, A, B. But then shines. See, you don't have A anymore. Therefore, I am saying that he is using the idea of turn or volta, but he is not using the idea of octave. He is rather giving you 3 4-line sets or quatrains. You can understand it because the rhyme pattern changes. He doesn't use the same set of rhymes which he uses in the first quatrain, because in the second quatrain he uses C, D, C, D. And then in the third you have E, F, E, F. See, you have clearly identifiable quatrains, 3 of them. So 3 4s are 12 lines, and then you have 2 rhyming lines which are the concluding couplet. So you have the rhyming pattern as A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And there is a rhyming concluding couplet, and there is a thematic turn and the 9th line. Now this thematic turn may or may not exist at times. So how is Shakespeare's sonnet different? First, it does away with the idea of octave sestet. He rather gives you 3 quatrains with a concluding couplet. Second thing is, there is an idea of turn, but it does not only happen in the 9th line. It is reinforced in the concluding couplet. So here you have the word but in the concluding couplet you have a real conclusion, so long. Okay. So therefore, the turn which starts in the 9th line actually concludes in the concluding couplet. It's reinforced, that is Shakespearean. So whenever you have the rhyming couplet thing, you will understand that this is a Shakespearean sonnet. But did Shakespeare invent this kind of sonnet? No. See, Petrarch did not invent Petrarchan sonnets. Shakespeare did not invent Shakespearean sonnets. The funny part is, people don't remember who starts something. People remember who popularizes them. So, even then, you needed to go viral to be remembered, even your name to be attached to something. So just like we have forgotten Lentini, let's not forget him, please. Let's remember, let's know who was the person who first started using the idea which we now call the Shakespearean sonnet. Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, the same Surrey who is mentioned with Wyatt and Surrey, that Surrey. His name is actually Henry Howard. He was the Earl of Surrey. Surrey is the name of the place. So Henry Howard was the person who started writing sonnets in this fashion. So let's look at a sonnet by Henry Howard. I've chosen this sonnet from Tuscan Came My Lady's Worthy Race. If you look at this poem, you can see the rhyme scheme is what we have in Shakespeare's sonnets. It's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. And we have the idea of rhyming couplet concluding the poem. And there is no strict division between the first 8 lines and the last 6 lines. The last 2 lines give kind of some conclusion to his idea, and therefore this was the basic frame on which Shakespeare built his empire. Shakespeare built his empire of drama based on what Marlowe did. So he was a man who knew how to use his resources, including Holinshed. Anyway, now let's come to a very beautiful kind of sonnet where you really have to work very hard if you want to write this kind of a sonnet, because this kind of sonnet demands the greatest focus when it comes to rhyme scheme. This is called the Spenserian Sonnet. It's also called the Scottish Sonnet. Here you have the idea of quatrains. So it's not octave sestet. You have 3 quatrains and concluding couplet. But the quatrains are not completely detached from each other. In Shakespeare, you had what? A, B, and then C, D, C, D. So A, B, separate from C, D, C, D. No link there. If you wanted to write a Shakespearean sonnet, you could write it at least. But what happens when you want to write a Spenserian sonnet? A, B, and C, D are not separate anymore. They are connected. How? You get something like A, B, B, C. So it's as if you are interlocking the quatrains. You are connecting the quatrains. That makes it even tighter, harder to rhyme. Because earlier, if you were writing a Shakespearean sonnet, you had to think about 2 rhyming words. Now you have to think about 3 or sometimes 4 rhyming words. Even more difficult in English. But that's why Spenser is called the poet's poet. He was amazing when it came to versification. Okay, so let's look at a Spenserian sonnet. Let's look at a sonnet by Spenser rather. Very famous. One day I wrote her name upon the strand. Let's look at the rhyming scheme first. See, strand A, away B, hand A, pray B, essay B. So how many B's are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. In Shakespeare, you needed 1 pair of rhyming words in a stanza. A, B. That means you needed 2 A and 2 B. Here you need how many B's? 4 B's. Okay, you need 4 C's. So you need more rhyming words. You need a more thorough grasp on vocabulary to do that. And of course, there is this couplet at the end. Now, if you look at the theme of the poem, is there any turn here? In the 9th line, let's look at the 9th line. Usually, this is the most interesting line. Not so could I, let baser things devise. So, some kind of question is asked, some kind of problem is posed in the first 8 lines. In the last 6 lines, some kind of answer is suggested. So, yes, there is a thematic division, but you cannot call it an octave sestet division because the 9th line ends with devise and the 8th line ends with likewise. So, there is a rhyming connection. So, they are not disconnected. So, they are not cleanly separate octave sestets, but there is a turn, just like Shakespeare. So, you can understand that Spenser builds on Shakespeare and makes it even more compact. So, that is what Spenser does. So, don't forget the rhyme scheme. It's A, B, B, C, C, D, E. So, in Shakespeare, you have G, and in Spenser, you have E, because he reduces the number of rhymes needed. Okay, so these were some of the more prominent variations. Often you will be given, in case of competitive exams, you might be given 4 lines, and then you need to identify whether it's a Spenserian sonnet or whether it's a Shakespearean sonnet. So you will have to understand that you need to remember the rhyming schemes. And in case of Petrarchan sonnet, you have to see whether there is a rhyming couplet or not. If there is a rhyming couplet, chances are it's not a Petrarchan sonnet. If you can clearly identify the 2 separate parts, octave and sestet, when it comes to rhyme, then it's definitely a Petrarchan sonnet. So you have to remember the rhyming scheme, the concept of octave and sestet, and the concept of volta. Volta can be in any kind of sonnet. So don't think that volta or turn comes only in Petrarchan sonnet because there is an octave, then a volta, then a sestet. No, it's not like that. Volta is a turn, a change in tone. This happens in Shakespearean sonnets. This you find in Spenserian sonnets, because that is what a sonnet is. A sonnet is a poet talking to himself, a conversation of 2 personas of this poet. He's asking himself a question, getting an answer back. Therefore, there has to be a shift in tone. And this shift in tone is volta, which is present in all kinds of sonnet, most kinds of sonnets, which are, well, beautiful sonnets. Now we will come to some special variations, which sometimes do not even look like sonnets, where you will be forced to ask me that how are you calling these sonnets? These are not even 14-line poems. I'll tell you what. The first term that I'm going to discuss is called a chordate. Chordate means when you add a tail to something. So when you expand a sonnet, you write a sonnet, then you just add a few lines. Now you will ask me, what do you mean by add a few lines? If you add a few lines, it doesn't remain a sonnet. Yes, but you can clearly identify the strict square box of sonnet before you start reading the last few lines. This was mostly invented by a person called Francesco Berni. He was in 16th century Italian poet. Usually it is not seen much in English verse, but whenever it's used, it's mostly used for satirical purposes. I'm giving an example. You can easily see that there is this ABBA, ABBA, CDE, DEC. So this is pretty much very similar to a Petrarchan sonnet pattern. Fine. But then you have certain lines which follow, and this word Trent is connected to the word parliament. So although the length is shortened, so this is a deliberate way of telling you that this is not part of what is going in front of it, because this is different. The length of the lines are different, but it is connected because the word Trent is rhyming with parliament. Okay, and there is this concluding couplet kind of a thing here. When they shall read this clearly in your charge, new presbyter is but old priest with large. So you have this idea of a concluding couplet too, although this whole 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines, additional sestet, we can say, destabilizes the Petrarchan model because it is not helping. You already have a 14-line poem going in front of it. So what it does is it gives you a kind of confusion whether to call it a sonnet or not. This is a sonnet where you have this special term for it. It's called a chordate. The next term which I want you to look at is called curtal sonnets. In case of chordate, you have a tail added. In case of curtal, just the word sounds what it means. You actually cut off parts of a 14-line poem. It's as if a sonnet was written and somebody just cut through it. So it's a shorter version of sonnet. Usually you have 11 lines mostly, and the rhyming pattern which we have usually identified with curtal sonnets are ABC, ABC, DCB, DC, or ABC, ABC, DBC, DC. So mostly it has 4 sets of rhymes, A, B, C and D. in permutations and combinations. The special part, the special thing about the last line of this kind of sonnets is the fact that the last line is very short. It's half a line actually, mostly 2 syllables only. This kind of poem was first popularized by Gerard Manley Hopkins. If you look at poems like Pied Beauty, Peace, you would see he has created this special kind of sonnet where you do not have 14 lines and you have such an emphatic last line. So it's like 10 and a half lines, not even 11 lines. So let's look at a Curtle sonnet. Look at the rhyme scheme. A, B, C, then D, B, C, D, C. And the last part is a very powerful half line, praise him. If you know about prosody, you can see that it's a spondaic foot, which means you have to use a lot of emphasis in the last line. So instead of going into the regular pattern of 8 and 6 division, what kind of division do we have here? First we have division of 6 lines, and then we have 4 lines, and then we have half line. So he completely destabilizes the structure of sonnets and makes it evolve into something completely new. We also associate the word sprung rhythm with Hopkins, and these words are intimately connected to each other, and they are very important for any kind of entrance exams or competitive exams. Now let me talk to you about very interesting terms which are related to sonnets. First is very obvious, sonnet sequence or sonnet cycle. Now sonnet sequence means a group of sonnets thematically connected. Sometimes they have a chronological chain or kind of a cyclical pattern. So somehow they are linked logically to each other. They are usually written by one poet. It can be a collaboration. They are mostly written at one go. It's not like people write one sonnet sequence over 40 years. Usually that doesn't happen. So it has a quality of being published together as a sequence. And let me give you some very useful examples. Again, this is going to come very handy in exams. Philip Sidney, very famous writer of sonnet sequence, and the name of the sonnet sequence is Astrophel and Stella. It was published in 1591. You have 108 sonnets and 11 songs, and this is supposed to be addressed to somebody called Lady Rich, and the writing period is supposed to be between 1580 to 84. So within the span of 4 years he wrote this whole thing, and it was published at one go in 1591. Another very famous example is Edmund Spenser's Amoretti. Amoretti, the name sounds what it means, it's all full of love. You have 88 sonnets in this, and then he has this sequence called Epithalamion, addressed to his wife Elizabeth. All right. And then you know about Shakespeare's sonnets, 154 sonnets, one set of sonnets written addressed to an unknown entity. We are not even sure if that's a friend of his or a patron, but it's clearly a male figure, and another set of sonnets within the same sequence addressed to a dark lady. All right. So we have different kinds of people he addressed to. They were published in 1609. Now, after Shakespeare, there was a decline in writing of sonnets, although we have in metaphysical poets also we have some sonnets. In Milton, we have a couple of sonnets, although on the theme of philosophy, religion, society, culture, and politics. During the 19th and 20th century, it came into fashion again, the sonnet genre. We have sonnets from the Portuguese by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, published in around 1850, 44 sonnets addressed to her husband, beautiful poems, and The House of Life by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Okay, he belonged to these group of people who call themselves pre-Raphaelites. 101 sonnets. We have George Meredith's Modern Love. Here we have a kind of a variation. The poems were 16-line poems, not 14. But that doesn't mean it's a chordate poem. Chordate poem means it has to somehow deliberately look like a tale. But when you just overflow because you have more to say, then that's like a variation of the sonnet form, not a chordate sonnet as such. In fact, interestingly, Shakespeare also did a number of alterations at times. Now, if you take, for example, sonnet number 126 by Shakespeare, you would notice that it doesn't follow the pattern of 14 lines. It's actually 12 lines. And the rhyme scheme is also weird. A, A, B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F. So you have 6 rhyming couplets. Maybe because it was the last poem that he was addressing in the sequence to his fair friend. After this, we have the whole series dedicated to the dark lady. So what was he doing? He is concluding his efforts. So he thought that it would best be if he gave concluding lines like that, rhyming couplets, giving a sense of closure there. In sonnet 99, he overflows. He writes 15 lines instead of 14 lines. Maybe he was getting very emotional in that poem, too emotional to contain himself within the bounds of 14 lines. So poets do these experiments all the time. So just remember the facts about sonnet sequences, that Meredith's sonnets, they were all 16-line poems. Wanda Coleman is somebody with whom we have a sequence of American sonnets, all right, and they were published in the end of the last century, in the year 1994, so pretty recent. Now, what happens when you publish a sonnet sequence and those sonnets are somehow more connected to each other than just thematic connection? What if there is a structural connection? Now, I'm going to give you a term which is called crown of sonnets. It happens when you publish 14 sonnets together in such a way that the last line of the first sonnet is the first line of the second sonnet, and the last line of the second sonnet is the first line of the third sonnet. So the last line of one sonnet is exactly the same as the first line of the next sonnet. And what happens at the end? In the end, that is in the last sonnet of that sequence, the line which ends that sonnet is the first line of the first sonnet. So the whole thing is like a cycle, or the circle, you can say, the circle of perfection. And since it's a circle, it looks like a crown which you wear on your head, and it's also a crown because it's so majestic. You're creating a seriously huge thing here, because it is so difficult to write one sonnet. There you are putting yourself through this horrible exercise of not just writing 14 sonnets, but connecting them thematically and structurally and literally to each other in this way. So it's called a crown of sonnets. I'll give you a very famous example of a crown sequence, although it's not a full crown, it was only a 7-line crown, you can say. So you have sonnet where the first line matches with the last line of the previous sonnet, and the last line here you can see, deign at my hands this crown of prayer and praise. He actually uses the word crown there. Donne is very witty. He is a metaphysical poet. Wit is everything he does. So he is literally connecting this to the first line of the first sonnet, that is, deign at my hands this crown of prayer and praise. So he creates a crown and tells that he's creating a crown and he is offering it. He wrote it addressed to Queen Mary, and how she is going to find a place in heaven after her death. So this is what a crown looks like. If you want to know about a complete crown of 14 poems, you can look up Lady Mary wrote a crown of sonnets dedicated to love. She was also a kind of contemporary to Donne, although because she is a woman writer, we know less about her. What if you write a 15th sonnet where all the last lines of the previous 14 sonnets form the entire body of the 15th sonnet? That's an unimaginable feat. It is called a heroic crown, the crown of crowns. Okay. And about heroic crown, I can't give you any example from any popular poet, but it is also called a sonnet redouble. So what is a sonnet redouble or a heroic crown? Where you have 14 sonnets followed by the 15th sonnet, where the 15th sonnet contains all the lines or the last lines of the previous sonnets. And this whole thing has to be a crown sequence. All right. So this is a very difficult thing to achieve. People are experimenting a lot. I found a lot of amateur writers who are trying to create wonderful heroic crowns. You can look them up, of course. Modern experiments include word sonnets and unrhymed sonnets. Now, modernism is all about breaking the traditions, conventions, and somehow connecting to how we actually feel, not the ideal world, but the real world. So the first thing we have is unrhymed sonnet. We have it from Auden, who was a master experimenter. Now, if you take away rhyme from sonnet, what remains? Because we were obsessed from the very beginning to identify what rhyming scheme is there. Here you do not have any rhyming scheme. The poem is The Secret Agent. It's by Auden. We have a thematic division between octave and sestet. There is no concept of concluding couplet because there is no rhyme. So why are we calling it a sonnet? Because it's a little poem, it's a little song, it's lyrical, musical, and it has a kind of meter, a kind of beat in it. Let me read a little part of this poem to you, where you will understand that Auden doesn't need rhyme to sound musical. Control of the passes was, he saw, the key to this new district, but who would get it? He, the trained spy, had walked into the trap for a bogus guide, seduced by the old tricks. And then let's come down a bit in the sestet part. The street music seemed gracious now to one. For weeks up in the desert, woken by water, running away in the dark, he often had reproached the night for a companion. Dreamed of already, they would shoot, of course, parting easily too, that were never joined. You have no rhyme here, but you definitely have a lot of iambic here. An iambic pentameter is the soul of sonnet. Auden knows that, so he doesn't use rhyme, yes, but he doesn't do away with iambic. He doesn't go for any other kind of meter here. And therefore, we have conforming to and then departing from the rules of the sonnet. The last kind of sonnet which we will look at today is word sonnet. Again, an extreme experimentation. Let us first look at a poem which can be called a word sonnet, where all the lines of the sonnet are single words. The poem is called January, is by Seymour Main. After the third fall, even the traffic trails away in the thick sinking snow. So see that beautiful beat coming in. You have to get in rhythm to read this poem. Why are we calling this a sonnet? How many lines are there? 14 lines. Are these lines? Do we call these lines? These are arrangement of words. Instead of arranging them in a horizontal way, we're arranging it in a vertical way. But that is what modernism, postmodernism, postmodernism is about. It's about arrangement, dearrangement. It's about destabilizing the concept of space, just turning everything inside out. So this is what we have here. So you know what a chordate is, you know what a curtal sonnet is, you know what a word sonnet is, and you have seen examples of unrhymed sonnets. So these are the experiments which we find mostly in the late 20th century or mid 20th century time period. So like most other poetic forms, sonnet has also undergone various transformations, stages of evolution, and it's not just structurally, thematically, stylistically, adaptations and modifications have been there since its very birth in Sicilian soil nearly 700 years ago. And this is what English poetry is about. It is so powerful because it knows how to adapt conventions as per the requirement of the present generation. It knows how to adapt and evolve. So before we wrap up today's session, let me just remind you of the three major genres of sonnet. One is Petrarchan, one is Shakespearean, and the third is Spenserian. Although technically we can say we have two variations. One is the Italian variation and one is the English variation. We do not have that much of difference between the Scottish variation and the English variation, other than the rhyming scheme concept. And in all these we can identify some kind of turn which comes in the 9th line in case of Shakespeare, in case of Spenser, because we have the concluding couplet concept. So that volta continues and is reinforced in the concluding couplet as well. So we have two phases of turn, you can say, in Shakespeare and Spenser. Whereas in Petrarch we have a single turn or volta during the beginning of the sestet or end of the octave. I hope you have understood what are the different aspects of sonnets. Maybe in future videos we can study some of the sonnets which are prescribed for you in general, maybe some sonnet from Sidney or Spenser or Shakespeare or even Milton, where this background knowledge will be very handy for you to understand the deeper aspects of those poems. So thank you for being with us here today. I hope to see you all again in my next video. Till then, stay happy, stay subscribed, and festive greetings for all my Bengali subscribers for Durga Puja. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Bye-bye.